Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. We've talked a lot about mortgage stress recently on this podcast, but financial pressures aren't the only source of concern for Australians. A survey by global resource management giant Veolia says that climate distress and eco-anxiety have become the norm, with flow-on effects like food scarcity now considered a serious and immediate risk. I wanted to talk more about the findings, but also learn a little bit more about Veolia. It's a fascinating company working across water, waste and energy. Richard Kirkman is the Chief Executive Officer of Veolia Australia and New Zealand. Richard, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Hello, great to be here.
I want to get onto the survey in a moment, but if I look out my window and watch my garbage being collected or my recycling being collected, if I go and buy water, I see that Veolia name all the time. And it is a massive company within Australia, which many of us know very little about. So up front, can you give us the elevator pitch on Veolia, exactly what you're doing in Australia?
Yeah, sure. Well, look, globally, we are about 200,000 people operating in most large countries. And we're all about environmental improvement, treating water, recycling water, producing renewable energy, and doing the best we can to recover materials and energy back from wastes. In Australia, it's that 6,500 people, and every day we're waking up passionate about what we can do in those fields. And what we want to do as our kind of purpose is ecologically transform Australia's businesses, industries, cities, and the way people live, not to stop doing things because we think that just puts us back. Obviously, we can recover materials and we can prevent waste from being produced in the first place, but we need to move on and we need to just continue to do what we're doing, but do it without impacts on the environment. And we call that ecological transformation.
Okay. Now, Veolia itself is a French company?
Yeah, we're a 170-year-old French company. We first had a water contract given to us in France by Napoleon, actually, 170 years ago.
Wow.
And from there, we've grown into all these kind of human health services. Originally drinking water and waste management were really about human health and preventing disease in cities. And that's grown into a whole environmental movement and how we can do things better as human beings.
Okay, so I do want to get to the survey, but what are some of the bigger ecological transformation challenges in places like Australia? Is it all about, it's interesting what you said then, you kind of very much look forward to sort of saying, don't worry about the past so much, we just need to be better in the future, it seems. What are some of those challenges that you're helping Australians with to transform?
Well, look, let me give you an example of something that we've been doing as ecological transformation for 20 years. In New South Wales, there's an old mine, a copper, lead and zinc mine. And when that mine went insolvent 20 years ago, the miners were being made redundant. There was no one to pay them. And what was left was a big open cast area with acid forming rock and pollution running into the waterways, heavy metals running into the local creeks. And we proposed to remediate that entire site by setting up a rail link from Sydney down to the location, taking Sydney's non-recyclable wastes, using the site as a landfill, a bioreactor, to recover energy from that waste by producing gases that we can produce electricity from, and using some of the processed materials to remediate the mine site. So over the long term, we would return the site to nature. And during the whole operational phase, don't let any liquids go to the local creeks, so a zero discharge site. Also recycling materials into fertilizers, running a fish farm from the waste heat, recycling materials, having a solar farm and a wind farm on the site, turning it into an eco precinct. So that's what I mean by ecological transformation, taking something that has maybe not been done in the best way in the past and just turning it around so it's providing benefits to local and regional people.
So there must be a lot of research involved in Veolia, though, because what you've just spoken about, I'd imagine, is kind of at the front of the curve in terms of transforming regions and places like that. 170 years old, operating across a lot of sectors, you must to some extent be research driven.
We've got lots of research going on, different types. So the survey, the barometer that we recently conducted across the world and in Australia is telling us what people think. So we can make sure that what we're offering tunes into what citizens want, because what citizens want turns into votes, turns into policy. So we're very tuned into the needs of our stakeholders and people. But we also have lots of research into technologies and different systems we can use to improve the way we do things. We've got about 1,000 people across the globe that are researching different opportunities. As you say, that operation in New South Wales has been happening for some time, but we've got new things that we can do, such as thermal recovery of energy from wastes and turning wastes into materials that can be reused. So we're currently putting in planning applications to develop that type of asset, because today Australia landfills all its residual waste. There's a couple of new facilities going up in Perth, and we kind of need to build a few of those recycling centres over on the eastern seaboard. And then, there's technologies and solutions that are a bit further in the pipe, such as mining the streets for heavy metals, where, you get little bits of heavy metal coming out of car exhausts, palladium and platinum, which we could recover, and turning sewage sludges into plastics. They're a bit further down the line. So we kind of got things that work today, things that we want to implement right now and get together funding and approvals to build them, and then things that we need to do in the long term. So it's a real moving feast.
Stay with me, Richard. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Richard Kirkman, CEO of Veolia Australia and New Zealand. Okay, now you mentioned the survey gauged opinion on climate change and the willingness of people to accept solutions. What did you find, and were you surprised by the amount of anxiety out there?
It was pretty high. 84% of people say they're either concerned or anxious about climate disruption. And of that 84, 1 in 4, so about 25%, admitting that the threat of climate change was so worrying to them that it was preventing them from making long-term life plans. So it certainly seems that people are taking it seriously. I think somewhat more positively, Australians think it's a shared responsibility to solve it. I think that tunes very much into the Australian culture. So people think 65% of people think businesses should do something about it. 70% of people think authorities should do something, and 69% think people, citizens, should do something. So most people seem to think that most people need to do something. And I guess that's kind of obvious when you think this is a whole economic problem of the way that we live. So if everybody doesn't do anything, it doesn't work. You can't just have governments decide something. You can't just have citizens. You can't just have businesses. Everybody needs to play their role in this future direction we all want to go in. And, I think people also from this survey have tuned into the fact they will personally do something. So we've got a very high number of people saying they would go and buy recycled packaging, that they would sort their waste more at the household, and that they would allow a recycling centre to be built near them. So with that high level of change, and it was in the 80s, 80% of people thinking those things, I think it's really possible to do something because you've got the will of the people with you.
Are all three groups, the people, business and government, doing enough now? I get that they want to do it, but kind of how far down the path are they?
I kind of think, for any kind of change, you need three things. You need the economic model and the finances to do it. You need the money to be able to invest, and you need the technology. That's the second thing you need. You need a working technology, and then you need the will. You need the ambition, the idea, and the willingness to actually do those things. And, I think we do have those three ingredients. People would like to see a change. And there is money to invest in this sector, the environment sector, because it's seen as a growth area. And there are plenty of technologies and examples and references of people doing it elsewhere. In Europe or other places around the world, there is more recycling going on. So we can quickly leap to those new answers. I think everybody's willing to move. It's just a matter of how many of us are actually going to get up and do something. And that's what the 6,500 people at Veolia are doing every day. They're very passionate about bringing about this change. And we're just trying to think what we can do next to build a new facility, recycle a new type of material, work with another business to see how they can make their products so they're more recyclable, or encourage them to use recycled water.
Whereabouts is Australia? You mentioned Europe a moment ago. Whereabouts is Australia on this journey? It's lagging Europe, I'm guessing?
So if you look at waste, we're a little bit behind in terms of recycling levels, but that's caught up very quickly. So 10 years ago, Europe was recycling 50% of their household wastes, had a 3 or 4 bin system outside the front of people's properties. And that's just being adopted across Australia now. The biggest change is food and green collections, FOGO collection, which is just being made mandatory across New South Wales. That will require people to separate out everything organic at home and put it into a different container. And once they do that, we're able to take that material, turn it into a compost, turn it into a fuel, and really put a full circular solution in place, what we call the circular economy for that material.
Okay, what is the single thing that I can tell my kids to do? Is it actually sorting through waste? Is that, and this is a sort of a serious question, but if we've all got to play a role here, and more than 80% of us think we should play a role, how do we do it? What's our first step?
I think it's really starting with what would have the biggest impact. I often think people are obsessed by, can we recycle straws and, plastic knives and forks and these small things that are being banned. And look, that's important. We need to make sure that we don't put things in the ocean. But it's maybe more important to think about the vast volume of material that currently goes into landfill and is not reused and could be used. So go and check out one of those facilities, have a look at what happens, and then listen to what's being proposed as alternatives. Because when we do try to build new facilities, when we do build recycling centres and composting plants and energy recovery facilities, there's often some local people that don't want that to be built because they think it should be built somewhere else, or they think there shouldn't be any waste. And we've got to, as a society, decide, to move on, build renewable energy facilities, have solar panels on our roofs, drink recycled water. That's another great example. We produce recycled water, which is cleaner than the water we're using to make drinking water, but no one wants to drink it because it's come from the household. And we need to start thinking differently about these resources and how we can use them more efficiently.
Richard, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you. Great speaking to you.
That was Richard Kirkman, Chief Executive Officer of Veolia, Australia and New Zealand. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.